Way back in 1977, I was appointed by President Carter to be a Peace Corps director in Lesotho. I just loved the appointment, and I come to love the Peace Corps as well. Those young people that join it, they do their job and spend 2 years doing their job and go home. And pretty wonderful program even to this day. It's an amazing thing that President Kennedy he did that. And so when I was appointed, I landed the day that Stephen Biko was buried, the great Stephen Biko. I met Ambassador McHenry, who was at the funeral for the President Carter at the airport, and I said to him, "Are these people as crazy about this apartheid business as possible?" He said, "Jack, they're worse than you could ever know." So I thought, boy, I'm really in for something. So they refused me entry into South Africa because I hadn't asked for a passport or a visa, which I purposely had not done. So they said, "You have to go back. Wait 3 days, you're going to be sent back to the United States." So I called Pan Am and I said, "I have the right to overfly to Lesotho, and I want that right. I want to go to Lesotho, and if you don't, I'm going to talk about Peace Corps not ever flying in a Pan Am flight ever again." So anyway, it ended up on Sunday. I got a private plane, drove up to the door of Jan Smuts Airport. I get in the plane. The pilot says to me, "Who are you? You're some famous person." I said, No, I'm a simple Peace Corps director. We're nonviolent people." He's so good. He said, "I'll put my gun away." He had a gun. He put it away. Anyway, he flew me to Lesotho. That's how I got there. But what I realized after a short time, this struggle against the apartheid was a massive struggle, even bigger than I ever thought it was. And luckily for me, our Archbishop of the Episcopal Church was Archbishop Tutu, who became the architect of the Mandela movement eventually, and he was wonderful to work with. And I used to negotiate volunteers with him. And he always asked for more than he could use, but a great man, and loved working with him. And one day, a bomb went off in one of the rondavels. Rondavels are thatch roofing with mud walls. It actually works in the summertime. It's cool in winter. It keeps you warm. And the nurse of our Peace Corps lived next door in the next rondavel to where the bomb had gone off. And so she was immediately over there. And what it turned out is Phyllis Naidu, the political leader of the African National Congress of Mandela, was wounded badly. She had luckily been over when they cut the cord to open the clothes from East Germany for refugees. When they cut that cord, that bomb went off and hit her upside, her backside, blew out her right eardrum. Father John, who was a wonderful Episcopal priest, he was standing by it, and it blew his private parts off. And Faith Merrick, who was our nurse, called me at the office, said, "Jack, get up here. Something's really gone wrong. This bomb has gone off." So I ran up there, and we pitched in. We did everything possible. Whatever drugs we had in our offices, we poured into both, because the medical help in Lesotho wasn't much. The hospital wasn't much good. Both these people we couldn't send into South Africa wounded, because the South Africans had just wounded them with the bomb, tried to kill them. And so over the days of recuperation, me and the staff at the Peace Corps, we would supply food and stuff at the hospital and look out for them, and we would raise a few bucks, and we'd give them clothing. We did whatever we could. It wasn't a whole lot, but it did show our friendship, and nicely so. And so the ANC, African National Congress people, noticed this about us, and we became friends. And it's interesting because Phyllis Naidu, within about a week, introduced me to Chris Hani. Now, if you don't know history, you wouldn't know who he is, but he was the Ike, the Eisenhower of the war of Mandela against apartheid. He was probably about 38 or 40 when I met him. He looked like a kid. I mean, he actually looked like he was 22 years old. And I expected this military leader, to be rough and tough with his guns and, all that goes with military. And it turned out it was a very Catholic kid who knew more about Catholicism than I did. And we would argue about different readers like Belloc and Chesterton and, St. Thomas. And he actually was a well-educated Catholic kid. who was trained in, I think, Eastern Europe and in Russia as a military leader. And he was a communist, a die-hard, strong communist. And Phyllis Naidu, of course, was the political leader and probably the most famous woman in the anti-apartheid movement as well. So these two friendships, we bonded together, and this gave me an enrichment that I'll never forget, because it really convinced me of the position of against apartheid, which I was there anyway when I got there. Of course, half the world was anyway. But the United States had an embassy and supported apartheid by supporting the South African government. So there I am against this system. I called for a voluntary boycott by our volunteers, and the security chief from Bloemfontein of the Boers came over and met me in the street and said, "I hope you enjoy Southern Africa, Mr. Healey." Kind of a threat. I didn't know what to do with the threat. But it was an experience coming from the bombing to meeting Bishop Tutu, who was leading the battle for Mandela. I was in the midst of one of the great movements of all time. And within our movement, Peace Corps, we had a goodly number of minority volunteers who would not qualify as white in the Republic of South Africa. So if you were dark brown, Mediterranean, you were Chinese or Japanese, the strange thing was the Chinese to the South Africans were black, and the Japanese were considered white. And we had both Chinese, descendants and Japanese volunteers, not Japanese volunteers, but Japanese families, who had volunteered in the Peace Corps. So I had this experience of talking to a young black couple. I think they were Mr. and Mrs. Charles Blake, if I remember their name. And they were black. And when they traveled in South Africa, as opposed to two whites from the Peace Corps traveling in South Africa, it was a totally different experience. They had to be ready for real trouble. They could be given a hassle if they got hurt in an accident, or they go to a black hospital, which wasn't as good as the white hospital, but they wouldn't let them into the white hospital. What do we do about this? And many of my volunteers traveled on bikes, on dirt bikes, when they were training different teachers around. So they were maneuvering a lot. And so I had to find out what do I do with this problem? And so I went to see the embassy, and they told me, well, if one of them gets hurt badly, we'll bring a jet down from Frankfurt. I said, 12-hour flight to and from, 24-hour flight, one big jet for. So I got back to the Peace Corps. I talked to David Levine, the training director, the other Peace Corps directors who were great. They felt the same as I did, Rich Petty in Swaziland, and the Russia's co-directors up in Botswana. We were in a unified position on this. So we changed the training program. And in order to do that in the training program that occurred in Lesotho, we actually had to hire people who knew what they were doing in South Africa and how we could handle, rough situations or, whatever happened to minority students in South Africa as well as whites who would travel together, sometimes black and white. So we would hire then ANC people who knew how to travel and how to handle South Africa. Well, then Senator, I forget the senator from South Carolina went after me that I was hiring communists. And I told him, yes, I am. Because they know how to help our volunteers travel safely when they go into South Africa, and we're against apartheid. The United States does support the policy, and this caused quite a senator, I forget his name, and it was like we were at war, and we didn't know it, but our little Peace Corps, we were up against that apartheid system, and they weren't. The U.S. government wasn't, and so we gained quite a quick reputation for this in Lesotho as people. As Americans who were basically really for, a total equality in South Africa, and we supported the African National Congress, not because they had a military that was fighting under Chris Hani, or Phyllis Naidu, who led the political. Right? So I fired him. Lesotho who wasn't doing his job, and he sued me. So I went to the ANC, to Chris Hani, and I said, give me a good lawyer, and he named Kaleki Sello. So Sello was wanted for murder in South Africa, which is not true, but that he was wanted for murder, and turned out to be a great lawyer. And I said to him, would you give me one of Mandela, because in the South African process of law, you have to have a lawyer and a barrister. I said, for the lawyer, would you get me one of Mandela's lawyer? And he did. He got Dennis Cooney, one of the great ones of South Africa. He came up to my trial. We won the trial, or I forget, we paid off or something, but anyway, it was all resolved. And I got inside the lawyers of Mandela, and I got to know many of those lawyers, the famous ones who were the close friends of Mandela. So this whole time, this is enriching my life, and this is all luck. This is happenstance because I was sent to Lesotho, and so I think if you look around your environment and there's something going wrong with it, you can find ways to, even as little minor people like I was a minor figure, you can change something like that. Then in the Peace Corps actually changed their program. We were backed by by Governor Celeste, who ran the Peace Corps. He backed us up totally. Dave Levine's office backed us up totally. They even put it in the paper how we had changed the policy in Southern Africa about Peace Corps. And we Peace Corps directors were all hanging together and respecting one another about being against apartheid the whole time that America has an embassy in South Africa. And so this was kept constant. This was a constant tension throughout my job, but it's one that elevated my life into really examining, what is going on, what is apartheid like, and the best I could refer to it as a system that was so brutal and so mean and so well thought through that even if a prisoner in the jail system went into the court, you couldn't bring torture as a weapon against the South African government in the courtroom. This was amazing to me. I think one of the story that sums up what I felt about South Africa is that once we were in Johannesburg, and I purposely went to a hotel that said it was international, because that meant we could have blacks, right, or browns or whatever. And so we're out there dancing, and this is the disco period, so we were having fun. They come out and told me, no, you can't dance black and white. Oh, I said, no. So let's call Pretoria, I say. So there was a hotline for these issues. So we actually called Pretoria, and they said we could dance till 2 in the morning, not further. This apartheid system is so weird, it's so crazy. But we eventually found a way that everywhere you went, the system worked against everything you believed in. And it was so total and so mean and so wild that you couldn't imagine the system working and how the U.S. government would support such a system. It was so brutal. And so what we Peace Corps directors did was just we took our positions as best we could, essentially against the U.S. government, but in the sense of apartheid. And I think we gained a respect for our volunteers who were working in Botswana, Swaziland, and Lesotho. They had more respect. I think the black communities in those communities respected our volunteers even more so, because they did do their little part against the apartheid system was so vicious and mean and cruel. So I think, again, if you bring yourself into the problem, get close to the leaders, listen to them, hear what they're saying. We listened to Archbishop Tutu. We listened to Chris Hani. We listened to Phyllis Naidu. We listened to Kaleki Sello. And we Americans gained, they didn't gain as much as we did, but we Americans, we gained a lot. And we also felt better amongst ourselves that we were truly equal wherever we went in South Africa, that we were treated exactly the same. So hunt for equality wherever you go. Fight against racism. It's a good fight. We got to win it, though. The decent have to beat the indecent. Thanks.